So I hit the street, and life in the street was mostly, pretty boring, except for the fact that you had to figure out where you were going to get something to eat and a place to sleep. And you had certain places that you could get clothing at too, and like there was a place that I went to called Camilla's House. That was run by these brothers, Christian. I don't remember the denomination. I think they were really Jesuits, and very nice guys. And you could go there to sleep. Maybe you get on a list, and then you would go there once, and then they would check. You couldn't go back for at least 1 week. But there was always a lot of guys waiting to get into the place. But you did get lunch there, and if you slept over there, they would give you a change of clothes. And then there were other places where you could go to get clothes. They had sort of stores. And one weekend came where, for some reason, I think it was a holiday. Yeah, it was a holiday. The brothers usually were open some Saturdays, but not all Saturdays. They would close on holidays. But sometimes you'd be able to get something to eat someplace else. But this was a weekend where I went from Friday to Monday. I didn't have anything to eat, and luckily I found a pizza box with some crust, pizza crust in it, quite a few of them, luckily, and I ate that. And then you had water fountains and stuff, water to drink. So that was a rough weekend. It was hot in Miami too, and I had whenever I was walking, I have an expression: every scrap of shade that I could find to get out of the sun. You couldn't stand in front of a store too long. They wouldn't like that. And certain places where you couldn't go that were shady. And the cops would make trouble for you in the park. If you lay down on the grass, they know just who you were. One time I was just sleeping on the grass, he wakes me up and, rousted me out of the park. They were there, the cops were not very nice, but, they had a job to do, you might say, but they kind of overdid it. So that's pretty much how it went. I just had absolutely no responsibility for the first time in my life. Grammar school, high school, college, medical school, internship, and 28 years or so of practice were just filled with all kinds of responsibilities. All of a sudden, my responsibilities were gone, and that felt very good. I finally didn't have any responsibilities whatsoever. Just every day figuring out, what I can get to eat, what if I have to steal something from the store, that kind of a life. Very boring, the same thing every day. The only thing is copping. Like a drug addict says, got to wake up in the morning, got to get my heroin fixed. You got to get up in the morning, you got to get your food fixed, and you had to get your sleep fixed. If you couldn't sleep indoor, get one of those places, which was rare. I think in Camilla's house and the Salvation Army turned out to be like, in the year and a quarter I was out on the street, maybe 6 or 7 times in that year and a quarter. So most of the time I was in the street. I found a place, they called it the Bed Shed, behind this house, and they had all kinds of stuff in there. It was kind of dirty, and people who lived there, if they knew I was there, they never said anything, because so I got a mattress and put it in there, and there were mice in there, and when it really got rain, I eventually got flooded out of that place. But I stayed in that place for about 6 months. I never begged in the street. But I did steal from stores. I'd go in there and get a package of bologna, or anything I could grab without anybody noticing it. But I got caught a number of times. In fact, one time I went into a restaurant, this was at the beginning, and just sat down and had a meal. Right. And then just walked out without paying, went up the street. They came after me, and I got arrested for defrauding an innkeeper. That was the charge, defrauding an innkeeper. Must have been a really old law. So, and I got sent to jail for that. Luckily it was under $50. So it wasn't a felony. And after a period of time, sitting by myself and thinking, I started to concoct a story in my mind, and I called it The Plan Man. And it meant, and the way that story went was that I was chosen by God uh, to endure this certain kind of life from the time I was born, that all my relatives, except 5 other relatives, were engaged in a way of viewing everything that I did throughout my life from the time I was born, and eventually killing me and the 5 other people involved who were not the Red Agents. And who were the Red Agents? They were a group of people in my family. They were my family who were part of a larger group, but they were the Red Agents who had this way of seeing any place they could on Earth, any place you were, they could see where you were. And they had photographed me or taken a film of me. At that time, there was no other way of doing it. Taking pictures of me, videos it would be today of me, and my family through all phases of our lives, and any kind of thing, and they would perpetrate these bad things on me when I got not necessarily illness, but they were very happy when I got ill, and any kind of accidents that happened in the family. They saw to it that things became so bad for people, so that all these things, all these adversities that happened in my life were really due to them. And then when they felt like it, they were going to kill me. And of course, their confederates in this were the other members of my family who I really didn't like. And that was Joan, to a lesser extent, Phoebe, and my aunts and uncles, and my cousin Herbie, who was the chief of the Red Agents, although we got along great when we were kids. I'd go to his house and everything, but that, of course, was all planned because they wanted to really get to see me, with Herbie and how I reacted so they could exercise their future problems with me. The basis of this was also that the Red Agents, there was a certain group of people in the world, the good people, they were good people. I call them the love people, who believed in love. All the Red Agents ever believed in was hate. And the love people always had an expression when they were going, saying goodbye. I love you more than anything in the world, and I will continue to love you forever. Something like that. Which the love people was always like saying, I love you, like we do today. Say love you to somebody, but they had a little expression of it. And the Red Agents saw them, of course, saying this all over the world. And their expression was, I hate you more than I've ever hated anyone in my life. They just substituted the word hate for love. That's how really evil they were. And they tortured people and killed them in their torture chambers. There was all kinds of horrible things that they did to people. But God said to me, it's funny, it says if you speak to God, you're praying, and if God speaks to you, you're schizophrenic. So God spoke to me and said, but you will eventually be the greatest man who ever lived, and this will all end happily because you're going to come out ahead of the Red Agents. So don't worry about all these bad things that might happen to you in the street, because they're engineering all of that, and they're going to see how tough you really are, because they don't know how you're going to react, but they're just going to be very happy to make you as miserable as they can. So that was essentially the story that I went by, that was happening in the street. And of course, it gave me a lot of strength to endure whatever I would have to endure, because it was a pretty nice reward there, the greatest man who ever lived. And so I said, I think I could do this. And that's pretty much how I got it into my mind that I was going to survive what was going to be ahead. Then I went into a department store to watch. As a matter of fact, it's really funny because it was the same. It was the department store I always went into. If I wanted to watch a horse race, I'd go in there. They had the races on, to demonstrate the television sets. So, but this time I went in there, and then the news comes on, and it says Herbert Adlerberg was going to defend Chapman, the murderer of John Lennon, who had been killed a couple of weeks before. And so that reinforced the whole story. I said, God, Herbert Adlerberg, I said, he's the head of the Red Agents, and he's my cousin. There were no people around. I could have told him that. This is my fantasy story. So it made the story even more true, that this is what is really happening. Of course, down deep I knew it wasn't, but it gave me a great sense of, interest. The whole thing really could be true. It made an incredible, boring existence all the more interesting. The Red Agents used to say 6 for the 6 because they were going to put the 6 of us, who were my mother and father, my 2 children, Jim and Peter, and Sandy and myself. They were going to put these 6 people 6 feet under. They were just going to take their time doing it by torturing us for 60, 70, as many years as they could. That's what I was thinking. And of course, when the thing with Herbie lent a huge reality to the whole situation, because of actually seeing him mentioned. And that went on for a while until on my 12th misdemeanor, I think it was for shoplifting. I went before the same judge I had the first time. The same judge that dropped the felony charge, stealing that jacket, which was like $300 jacket, down to under $50, so it wouldn't be a felony and jeopardize my license. But he knew I was a doctor, and he said, "This is going to be your last time in my court because if you come back again, you're going to be in jail for a very long time. So you better get your status together," or whatever he said. Get it together, because I don't want to see you back. Never forget that last thing. I don't want to see you back in my courtroom. And that made an impression on me. I was down in the shopping center of a department, a shopping center. I went into the place where all the restaurant area. And I look over and I see the girl who was also a member of the Red Agents that lived in my house after the kids left. After I got divorced and the kids were living with Vicky, I had these 2 sisters living in my house. I was having relations with one of them, and this other sister, Kim, I wasn't. So in my stories, I always would concoct these various stories of what happened with the Red Agents, and we were in jail, and they wanted to do this to my father, but all these fantasy stories. And one of the stories was that they killed Kim. Right up there with the reality of Herbie, my cousin, was the reality in the story that Kim had been killed. And then I look up and there's Kim. She didn't see me, but I saw her. This is really strange how this happened. I never could quite understand it, but I guess it finally brought me a lot closer to reality. And I said, well, now this story can't be true because Kim is alive. And you were positive in this story that she was killed by her fellow Red Agent. She didn't carry out her mission and they killed her. So I said, well, maybe the whole story isn't true, and that thing with Herbie is just a coincidence. The whole thing. I mean, do you really believe you could be the greatest? I started challenging it and realized that this was just my way of getting through it. I said, oh my God, this whole thing is true. I really am in the street, and I really all that stuff that I was denying with this fantastic story wasn't true. I said, okay, I think you better try to get a job and try to get out of the street. And on my 50th birthday, I walked from downtown Miami to up to where the kids lived. It's a long walk there. I don't know, that must be 25 miles. 20 miles each way for sure. I'd stay up there. I'd go into Reynolds Park and I'd sleep there, and I'd live up there for a while. And it was easy to steal in the stores too, because they weren't really looking for it. It was a so much better neighborhood. Downtown, they were always looking. So I'd stay up there for a few days, change the scenery. I went into the kids and said, I'm going to try to make an effort to come back. I had gone up to visit them many times. I'd knock on the door, my 3 knocks, they always knew it was me. They weren't too glad to see me. Who blame them? They had supported me nicely when I first went into the street, but then after a while, it was a great disappointment to them, especially Jim, because he was older. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to try to get out of the street. And I'll never forget, right in the middle of it, Vicky walks in. And she says, how dare you? How dare you come into this place? How dare you? She was just like freaking. So I said, well, I just want to tell the kids I want to try to make a comeback. And she just looked at me like, oh, really? And you know, very, very, pretty sarcastic. And kids didn't say anything. She went into our bedroom, I think, and I just left.